So the 10th chapter of the Gospel of John is actually kind of the heart of Jesus' story that John tells. It's kind of right in the middle. I think there's 21 chapters in John, so we're right in the heart of it. And our 10th chapter here comes at a time where Jesus has delivered and delivers a few more after this, a bunch of what are called I am statements. He does this because he's continually trying to reveal to his followers and anyone that will listen who he is and what he is about. So to give clarity to his listeners, Jesus says things throughout the Gospel of John like, I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the gate. I am the way. I am the vine. And on and on and on. He delivers multiple of these I am statements throughout the Gospel of John. And these are not just descriptive metaphors, but the I am part of all of those statements is really important. And it's a really intentional part of those phrases that he gives. For instance, when he's describing who he is to his followers and to anybody who will listen, he doesn't say, think of me like, and then use some sort of analogy. Think of me like bread. Think of me like the vine. No, he says, I am. He says, I am, and he repeats that over and over and over again. And those two words are really, really important anytime we come across them. Because every time Jesus says, I am, it recalls Moses' first interaction with God. Because when Moses asks for God's name way back, 1,000+ years before Jesus, in the book of Exodus, when Moses asks for God's name, what does God say? God says, I am. Because they're having this interaction, the burning bush and Moses, and he's supposed to go tell the Israelites who he's hearing from. So Moses goes up to God and is like, okay, so when I go and tell them what I'm supposed to say and who I'm hearing it from, what name do I say? And God says, tell them I am sent you. So fast forwarding in history to this part in the Gospel of John, in delivering these multiple I am statements, Jesus is revealing himself as the God of Abraham and Sarah, the God of Moses, the God of Israel. So that's really important. And here's a little fun fact for you before we continue. Now, as those of you recall in Holy Week, right? That Holy Week, Jesus comes into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, and he makes some noise Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday he has the Last Supper, and that night he's arrested and tried and crucified on Friday, right? So there's this scene when the soldiers come to the garden where Jesus is with his disciples. And there's this really intense moment because they come with what the Gospel of John says is a detachment of soldiers, and a detachment is 600 men. So they come with Roman soldiers, the chief priests, the temple police, or the police. They show up in the garden to arrest Jesus, and they're looking for him. And they say, we're looking for Jesus of Nazareth. And to that demand, Jesus responds, I am he. And the fun fact is that our English translations add the pronoun he. But the original Greek, so remember, or for those of you who don't know, the original language of the New Testament was ancient Greek. It's a dead language now, but it's ancient Greek. And in the original Greek in which this passage was written, it was only the verb. In the original language, there is no pronoun he. So in that heated and intense moment, 600 soldiers, chief priests, police, coming up to Jesus to arrest him, they demand his identity. And he only says, I am, offering the exact name that God gave to Moses. So that's your fun fact for today. I think that's so hardcore. And I think the English translation kind of misses it by adding that pronoun, maybe to avoid confusion. But I'm hammering this all home to hammer this point. When Jesus is saying I am statements, he's revealing himself to be God, the God of the Old Testament, the God of creation, the God of Israel, the God of all of history. And he does so to reveal that he is that God, and then he adds a metaphor to say, and now this is what this God is like. God is here, and God is like this. That's what all the I am statements are doing. And today, the I am statement that we get is, I am the good shepherd. And now to understand that metaphor, I have a story that I first heard from my Uncle Lauren, who's a retired Lutheran pastor out in Washington State, and I'll quote him all the time. He probably preaches half my sermons. That's how much of an impact he's had on me, as I'm basically regurgitating him. But maybe he's watching out there in Federal Way. Thank you, Uncle Lauren. So I got this story from Uncle Lauren that helps us understand that metaphor of Jesus saying that I am the good shepherd. And it's from an author named Lynn Anderson. And I quote, "Several years ago in Palestine, Carolyn and I rode on a tour bus through Israel's countryside, nearly mesmerized as the tour guide included a heartwarming portrayal of the ancient shepherd and sheep relationship. That the shepherd and sheep relationship is one that is very gentle. How he feeds them, gently cares for them, gently leads them. How particularly the shepherd doesn't drive the sheep from the back, but rather a shepherd always leads from the front, and that the shepherd does not need to be harsh with them because shepherds, they only need to have their voice heard, and the sheep know it and they follow." He then explained how on a previous tour, things had backfired on him when he was telling this story about shepherd and sheep relationships. In the midst of spinning his pastoral tale, he suddenly realized that his tour people on the bus, he had lost their interest. He was telling the story about how shepherds lead their sheep, and all the people weren't listening anymore, and they were looking out the window of the bus. And what was grabbing all of their attention was there was a man out the window chasing a herd of sheep. And not only was he driving them from the back, he was throwing rocks at them, and he was scolding them and yelling at them and even whacking some of them with sticks to try to get them into order. The man was literally doing what the tour guide was saying that shepherds don't do. He was driving them rather than leading them. He was being aggressive and abusive. So the guide had to stop the bus. So he stops the bus, he jumps off, and he confronts the man who's doing this. And he asks him, "What in the world are you doing? I just got done telling this tour of people that this is exactly not how shepherds treat their flock. So what's going on?" demanded the tour guide. And the man looked awkwardly, and he responded, "Well, I'm not the shepherd. I'm the butcher." That story, I love that story in and of itself for the reasons you just laughed. And that story really helps us understand what Jesus is communicating to us when he says, "I am the good shepherd." By saying that he is the good shepherd, Jesus is teaching us that he is not a butcher. He doesn't lead us like that. Instead, he tells us that he is the good shepherd, and he uses that specific metaphor while simultaneously saying, "And I know my own." Now think about that. Jesus says that he knows us, and that he knows us like the Father knows him and like he knows the Father. In other words, Jesus is saying in our gospel today, he knows you and I like God knows God's self. That's pretty full knowledge. Jesus knows us fully, and incredibly, his response is to be a gentle shepherd, not a butcher. He truly fully knows us, and his response is grace. And here's why that matters. Because each and every one of us, and none of us is immune to this, each and every one of us, we limit how much people know and know about us. We limit how much people know about us, our darkest secrets, our innermost thoughts, our truest intentions and motivations, our deepest insecurities. And we do that. We limit people's knowledge of ourselves in order to protect ourselves. So we are constantly in our daily lives limiting how much people really know. Why do you think on Facebook and social media we only present our most glamorous sides? And I'm as guilty of that as anyone. And it's not just in our Facebook and social media lives. In our workplaces, at our schools, in our social lives, and even within our own very families. Albeit at different levels, we protect ourselves from being fully known. To paraphrase the monk Thomas Merton, he said, ourselves, each of us, we clothe, we wrap in bandages of other people's perceptions of us, and then we say, oh, these bandages, that's the real self. That's really ourselves. That's the real us. But truly, from each other, none of us are truly and fully known. Think about it. Nobody here fully knows you. And nobody out there fully knows you. Because we don't let that happen. It's too risky. Of course, some people know us better than others, our spouses, closest friends, our siblings. But for the most part, even from them, people know the shell of us. They know what we let them know. And we do that on purpose. It's self-protection. Because what would people do? What would people say? What would people think if they fully knew you? What would you all think if you fully knew me? We limit people's knowledge of us, and we give them false images. And we do this because, well, we don't want to get butchered. But here in this passage, Jesus is saying that as our shepherd, he does fully know us. He knows our darkest parts. He knows the worst things we've thought, the worst things we've done. He knows our selfish intentions. He knows the truth beneath. He knows our deepest insecurities, our lies, our regrets, our shortcomings, our embarrassments, all of it. Now that can be awfully terrifying if the creator of the universe knows all of that. But what is his response to knowing each and every one of us fully? Is it ridicule? Is it abuse? Is it abandonment? Is it shape up or else? Is his response to drive us into order, to hit us with sticks and scold us and throw rocks at us like the butcher in today's story? No. In fact, his response is the exact opposite. For he is the good shepherd. He knows his own, and he loves his own. In fact, he goes further. He says he lays down his life for his own. And my friends, such love can be our freedom and our strength, because daily we fear being fully known, and that fear shackles us. But knowing that we do not have a butcher driving us, but rather a good shepherd who is the God of all creation, the ultimate I am, who sees each of us in our entirety, and his response is to choose love rather than slaughter. With that grace, each of us is set free to be secure in who we are, to walk a little taller and a little freer when we leave today, to live more confidently and generously because God comes to us not as butcher, but as good shepherd who would lay down his life. We are fully known. We are fully known, and to the good shepherd, we're still worth everything. And now one last thing. We as God's church are called to be a part of this loving work. So we too, the church, we are called, according to the Bible, to be Christ's presence on earth, to be the good shepherd on earth, and not to be butchers. And make no mistake, The church has behaved and does behave as such. From bloody histories of religious wars, to lust for power, to fractured communities, to our judgment of others, to not welcoming certain types of people, to shaming and exclusion, to so much more, the church has behaved as butchers. Butchers to our neighbors, butchers to each other. And the church is wrong when it abuses and behaves as the butcher. Because we're called to be like our good shepherd and to lead our community and to lead one another with voices of mercy and love. So sisters and brothers, go in humility and in power today as Christ's flock who is fully known and fully loved. And as God has been good shepherd to us, may we be good shepherd to one another. Amen.